Hey there, and welcome to the ECM Podcast. I'm Friedrich Kunzmann, and I'm excited to be hosting this newest episode of the podcast and take you behind the scenes of new music on ECM Records. Today I'm joined by the Austrian guitarist Wolfgang Muthspiel, whose second recording with his working trio of Scott Colley on bass and Brian Blade on drums is called Dance of the Elders. On the album, the group's interplay has grown even more fluid and the repertoire more expansive, with exquisite originals by Wolfgang himself and elegant covers of Kurt Weill's Liebeslied and Joni Mitchell's song Amelia. Wolfgang takes us through the album song by song and talks about the collaborative spirit he shares with his sidemen and about the magic of being able to tell a good story through the sequencing of an album. He mentions his admiration for musicians like Keith Jarrett, Brad Mehldau, and Joni Mitchell, but also his mentor, the late Mick Goodrick. Hi Wolfgang, thanks so much for joining us in the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Glad to talk to you.
A couple of years have passed since your last recording with Scott and Brian. Some of that time was probably spent still, but a lot of it also saw you touring internationally through Europe, the US, and more recently Japan as well. A time in which the three of you have grown as a working unit, I would assume.
I would say so. I mean, the story continues with these people. You know, I have the luxury of working with a certain bunch of musicians for many years, and definitely Brian and Scott are among this pool of people that I've been working for a long time.
Yeah.
This depending on what I'm into in terms of composing or leaning more towards the acoustic or the electric instrument, the repertoire comes out and then is sort of transformed by them, because as far as Brian's part, I never write anything for him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he sometimes gets the information of the bass player, but most of the times he just makes up his own parts. And also Scott's part is sort of negotiated. I give him a suggestion, but he often changes it. And this last recording was, after a long US tour. So we had played that material for a while, and, it felt like a great moment to document it in the studio. Yeah. Also with this kind of approach that I've got accustomed to with Manfred Eicher, basically, a concert in the studio.
Yeah. And those are the processes that kind of improve and that over time with a working trio, as opposed to more spontaneous touring or recording lineups. You guys have to have the time to get to know each other musically more intensively. And so I assume that what you just talked about, Brian doing his thing, Scott doing his thing, those things develop more and more over time, I would assume.
Those things develop, and also what's there and what's extremely valuable is the complete trust of all the musicians towards each other and towards the music. And a lot of times in the live concerts, things, we are always on the lookout for the specific thing that happens on this take right now, even though we know which tune we play, unless we play free, which also happens sometimes. But that's that kind of common awareness of guiding the music, but also being guided by the music together is a beautiful thing that we don't have to talk about. It's just, a band that has worked together that much, usually understands these processes. And I also have to say that I'm constantly learning from them in many ways. So it's always exciting to bring new music to them.
Was the new material for your album the result of the closer rapport? I mean, did you write it thinking of these two specific characters, or did you channel other energies too?
I definitely thought of them when I wrote it. And one part is just the song comes out and kind of becomes what it's supposed to be, hopefully. In a way, the composing process, in my case, is often more a kind of finding. Mm-hmm. You know, some cell comes out and wants to be developed, and usually has tendencies, if you follow them, mm-hmm. you know, the song will become reality. Often it also takes a while to find the next link, so to speak. But yes, the image of them playing it, and also the remembrance of their sound while I'm writing it, is definitely an inspiration. Yes, definitely.
After recording this music on the West Coast, you mixed it with Manfred Eicher in La Buisson in France early in the spring. What does that step, this mixing stage with Manfred, which is a collaboration, what does that look like? How intense is it?
Well, first of all, we're in a studio with an incredible engineer, Gérard, who we know intimately, and who's just, you know, has a great understanding for the sounds of instruments. And him together with Manfred create a sound that pretty much immediately speaks. Mm-hmm. There's no long search for some kind of EQ or something like that. It's always pretty soon there, the music, the sound of the music. And then there's the process of Manfred hearing the music and feeling the place of each piece. Mm-hmm. He sometimes hears something and immediately has an idea of where on the record it could be. And the story you tell through the sequence is very important. We're still thinking in terms of albums.
For sure.
Even though, you know, on most platforms the album in a way has is not there anymore. But we think in those terms still. How to tell this story, this 45-minute, 50-minute story. And that very much depends on the sequence of the songs. And in that case, Manfred made some choices that I would not have made, that were really surprising and great. I'm listening to the sequence now, and there is a certain way the music unfolds, how the instruments are introduced, etc.
Yeah.
That really happens with him. That's something I'm always looking forward to. And there's also songs that we recorded that don't make it on the record, because we had like an hour 20 of music.
Okay.
So only a certain portion of that music makes it on the album.
Can you give me a specific example of something that he placed somewhere where you wouldn't have expected the composition to pop up?
Well, the very first tune of the album, Invocation, is a tune that I had imagined rather at the end of the record. And he heard it and he asked me how I feel about having it as as the opening of the album. I wouldn't have thought of that, but then I listened to it with that perspective, and it made a lot of sense. And it's also, because I play I think even more than half of the record on acoustic guitar and the rest on electric guitar, and those sounds are so different from each other that you kind of have to also think in terms of colors. When do you introduce which instrument, which sound?
Yeah.
So he started with this electric, more ambient sounding piece, Invocation, long piece, long development, and then he introduces the acoustic guitar, and with two pieces that were very kind of core pieces for me on the album.
Yeah.
Also the title track, Dance of the Elders, that's sort of a type of chamber music, trio chamber music with acoustic guitar that I feel very, I feel it's very much me.
Yeah.
And us, it's that type of song. I have the feeling that's the three of us. We can. It's really our music.
Yeah, let's talk about the individual compositions more profoundly. I think that each one has a whole world of its own that opens up, kind of, because it really is. There's a nice balance between the tracks, but at the same time, there's also contrast and difference. Invocation is kind of feels like it has two separate parts: a gentle build-up and then an extended looping coda. First of all, is the loop recorded live?
On the concerts, we do that loop sometimes, and it's depending on the day, it will have a different tempo.
Yeah.
Once in a while, I also don't record the loop, but kind of play it and imply it. Mm-hmm. That can go many ways.
Yeah, that's cool.
But it's that type of long coda, moment you sometimes hear on Beatles songs or something.
Yeah. No.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's just a repetition of a few chord changes and a type of solo over it where you need a harmonic comping to be able to play that type of solo on top. And on this solo, I was very much, my association with that section of the song was always Zawinul.
Joe Zawinul. Yeah.
Who I adore, and I thought of him when I played that solo.
So that's why you switched on that chorus effect, maybe kind of channeled.
Exactly. Yeah. I wanted to have that other sound there, not a non-jazz sound in a way. And also, I was hoping on that section that there will be a long build-up from the drums. And these things with Brian, you provoke them, you invite them with your playing. Mm-hmm. You don't tell him. I always find it for myself as sort of a successful moment when I can provoke Brian into building his energy and his volume.
Yeah.
Because he won't do it just because somebody expects it. He will do it when he feels it. And on that section, that happens. I'm very happy about that. It's kind of an interesting sonic segment because Scott, for the most part of this vamp, plays arco bass, which I also didn't tell him to do. He just chose to do it, which is amazingly great under this loop of the guitar, and then Brian sort of plays with the loop and around the loop and builds a lot of energy, and I play this minimalistic solo on top. So
yeah,
it was a moment that I was happy with. I didn't really expect this to be the first song, but now it is.
It's pretty amazing how orchestral something can sound with only 3 people creating the layers.
I'm happy about that. Also, for the first section of the song, it's a very simple song, but maybe the architecture of it is a little bit unusual because first of all it's a drone. On top of this drone comes a small theme, small head, and then I have a little pocket of solo. But this is more like a sound solo. It's not really I use a type of delay with an interval, so the delay comes a fifth lower than what I'm playing, and that creates a certain harmonic world. It's really a type of solo that I would say is definitely not derived from any kind of jazz history. And then the little head comes again now with bass and drums, and then it's Scott's pocket of solo, and also there, it's mostly about atmosphere and sound and kind of staying in that room that the little song created.
There's certainly no showboating or bebop language going on. It's not
no blues lick there, and it's just this kind of a delicate song because you can destroy it very quickly with the wrong line, Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Next up is a prelude to Bach, where Scott, Brian, and you sketch out these tense, cloudy textures before you finish solo with a rendition of the famous Bach chorale, "O Sacred Head, Now Wounded."
This song is really a total spontaneous thing. Basically, it's a complete free improvisation, and at some point, at the end of this little development that we spontaneously came up with, I was thinking of introducing this Bach chorale. Mm-hmm. I had never done it before. I've never done it afterwards.
Wow.
It was that moment in the studio. And completely unplanned.
That's crazy how you prepared the room for that to come out of you then, basically.
Yes, this is not something I often play. I know that chorale and I love it, of course. I've played it years ago together with Uge Wesseltoft on a duo concert. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I've never played that piece, but I always loved it. And at that moment, in the end of the free improvisation, which we call Prelude, it just came to me and I just did it, and kind of quietly under the ending of the other two's development, mm-hmm. which at that point is a little busy and shimmering, and I thought it would be nice to have this quiet chorale sort of underneath.
Yeah.
And then they play with it for a while, and then they leave it, and then the chorale stays on its own and kind of quietly ends. Yeah, that was the moment, and also the gift. Sometimes you're lucky with, if you're open enough, stuff comes to you.
And the title track, Dance of the Elders, it has some very tricky composed parts, but also these feather-lied passages of improvisation. How did you pull that trick out of your hat? And how did your sidemen react when you brought this composition to them? Because it's not typical, jazz, as in something you'd expect on a guitar trio record.
I'm really happy to hear this, because this song is first of all rhythmically a little bit unusual. I only figure out what kind of rhythm it is once I've written it.
Yeah.
Then when I have to write it down, I realize, okay, it's this bar and this 5/4 and this 5/8, and then there's an extra beat and stuff. I find out later, because when I'm writing it, I don't want to be restricted by a certain signature. It's a kind of chamber music with a certain harmony that is. It's not really out, but it has some unusual intervals, like in the chords. The first chord is a chord where there's a fourth on the bottom, and then on top there's the third. So it's A from the bottom, A, D, and up there it's C sharp.
Uh-huh.
So that sound sort of guides the whole tune. That sound comes again and again in different variations.
It also makes it ambiguous, because you could interpret the harmony in two different ways. Basically, I feel it doesn't have to be the first interpretation. You could think
exactly.
You could invert the way
it has
you're
a little bit of
about
an openness. It's a kind of major chord, but it could also be a kind of dominant chord, because it has the sus4 in it, and it's both D and A.
Yeah.
But that kind of continues throughout the whole piece. That in the lower register of the guitar we have these fourths, which are unusual for guitar voicings, and
it gives it that unstable bass, since it's not it's not the root note. So you always have this.
Exactly.
You're not really being too decisive about things. You're letting it kind of float.
Yes, in my ear, it's not unstable, but it creates a certain color with the harmony, and that color is not folky because of this interval in the lower register, these fourths, and also it is a kind of slow dance or medium tempo dance, odd meter dance. That immediately reminded me of some kind of Eastern European traditions. And I had the image of these elder people on a square dancing to this, kind of with heavy bodies, but very elegantly. I thought about it, and that's why we called it that, Dance of the Elders. And there's one kind of peculiar section after the first head. The solo section, so to speak, my solo section, is turned out to be more like a collective solo, and there we introduce another rhythmical game where the solo section is basically in 4/4, but there's a section of the solo where we play 5/4. So where for about 8 bars there's always the 4/4 and the 5/4 together at the same time. One might play 5, one might play 4. In one instance, Brian even plays a 6 on top. So various rhythms at the same time that end up at the same point. And then comes my favorite part, which is Brian's solo over Scott and me clapping. And that was the first time I did something like that. And we did it live too. And it's totally fun to first of all to clap that rhythm, which is a 5/8 mostly, but at one point in the loop that we clap, it shifts. So sometimes in live concerts, very courageous people from the audience started to clap with us, and we looked at each other and we knew that's never gonna work, because there's this one section where there's a slight shift in the 5/8.
But that doesn't throw you guys off.
So they're bound to fail at that point, and it happened again and again. And then Scott and me have to, concentrate extra hard so that we stay at least in there.
Exactly.
And Brian plays a beautiful solo on top of it, again, sort of keeping that initial vibe of the song. This could also be sort of in a way destroyed by too much extra stuff that you put in there, you know, but he keeps it in that beautiful pocket.
But that's kind of his speciality, right? To be really subtle about it, but still there's this incredible intensity and build in his solo.
Yes, I mean, I'm so grateful for all these experiences with him, because it's been so many years, and really a lot of the times when I bring the tune, I have an idea of what they might do, but they always do something different, especially Brian. And when I think he's going to play a backbeat, he's probably not going to play a backbeat, and the other way around. And it's just great, because he makes up a part. He really searches for a part. It's more than comping. It's really making a part in the song and finding a part which can change from, you know, performance to performance, but still always with that role in mind, that he's gonna find a part for the song, so that the song can shine and, you know, be as wide as possible.
Next up, we have Kurt Weill's Liebeslied from Bertolt Brecht's Threepenny Opera. How did this song find its way into your repertoire?
Well, this song is a standard that I've been playing for a long time with many people, and it was introduced to me when I was studying. It was introduced to me by Herb Pomeroy, who was this wonderful teacher at Berklee College of Music, a master of arranging. And he had a very special band that played the arrangements of his students, and this band was usually the band you wanted to be in at Berklee. You know, lots of great musicians were in that band. I met Chris Cheek, for example, in that band.
Okay.
And Ingrid Jensen and many other people. And Roy Hargrove was in there, and everybody wanted to be in that band, basically. And the way he led that band was just amazing. What he said to his students, the arrangers, and what he said to us musicians. And he introduced this song, and I've played it ever since. It's a genius song from the Threepenny Opera with a very interesting harmonic twist. At each ending of the chorus, it goes a half step up, so you have this sense of an upward spiral harmonically. And I love that song, and it's just one of many versions, you know, that we just did in the studio. I'm very happy with it, but it could go many ways.
And then there's a bit of a 1970s folk rock vibe to your folk song, which makes me think of other ECM guitarists throughout the years. One of your main guitar teachers, I believe, and mentors actually was Mick Goodrick, who didn't record much but contributed to some major recordings on ECM, including his work as a sideman for Gary Burton and his leader record in Pausing. Am I way off the mark, assuming that that's at least partially where the tune comes from?
I'm very happy to hear that association. I didn't think of Mick in that context, but of course Mick is always with me. Mick is my big master, and I had a very intense, beautiful relationship with him. And of course his time with Gary was super interesting to me as growing up. And also later to have Mick as my teacher and then play with Gary, in his band. So that was just, these connections totally formed me, of course. But I actually, on that song, I guess I had a vague memory of some Keith things. Mostly those, the vampy improvisations that he...
The Belonging and My Song era, maybe?
Exactly. And also, just generally, sometimes you hear him play on one chord for a long time, and you can always tell how inventive somebody is harmonically when he plays one chord. Mm-hmm. Because everything he implies with his upper line and maybe with his middle voices, shows you all the chords he could go to, but is not really going to. And I always loved that situation with Keith. Again, this is something harmonically more triadic, and also a situation where a certain jazz voicing can sort of kill it.
Yeah.
But generally, it's just a song that I could hear with the trio, where Scott also has a little bit of a melody part at some point, and then it's a free impro, which starts on one chord, and in our case, it basically stays there. But on some live concerts, it also went to other places. Yeah. It's completely open.
Mildau is surely partly paid homage to in the rhythmic, naughty Cantus Bradus. Where did that song come from? At the center of this song, it has this very rhythmically elaborate playfulness to it. Is that something that you composed just on guitar and then brought to the band again?
Exactly. I composed it on guitar and then, found roles for them in that fabric of this rhythmical changes between basically eighth notes, 16th notes, and triplets. Yeah. Which but the main inspiration that I would say comes from Brad in that song. It's all a bunch of chromatic lines descending to a certain tonal center. Mm-hmm. And on the way, these descending lines create rather unusual chords and tensions. But in a way, all these lines fall down to a certain bluesy center. And this is a development that I hear a lot in Brad's songs sometimes, but also in his soloing. He likes to have these lines all lead to this pool of, of a root.
For sure.
And I like these moments in his playing, and it's inspired by him. It's also an homage, a tribute, because I really enjoy his music very much, and the times we made music together was very meaningful to me, and I'm always listening to what his new things and stuff.
I think it's interesting because I think he even has a song that he calls Spiral on one of his trio records, and that's kind of what it feels like, right? He's spiraling down to a tonal center.
Exactly. Whereas Liebeslied is spiraling upwards, Cantus Bradus is spiraling downwards, you could say, harmonically speaking.
I hadn't thought about that, yeah. A mirror effect on the album then.
You could say so. I didn't think of it that way, but just if you look at the harmonic movement, these directions are happening. Yeah, Cantus Bradus is often on the live concerts, has often been the opening song lately. I play some solo acoustic guitar, and then I play this tune, and that's how I introduce the band.
And last up on the album, we have the beautiful ballad Amelia from Joni Mitchell's 1976 album, Hejira. Joni is famously a major jazz enthusiast, inviting some of the best jazz musicians on tour and into the recording studio. There's a very complex fabric, melodic, harmonic, and also textural to her composing that only few, if any, singer-songwriters have mastered as gracefully as her. Maybe Paul Simon would be another, at least in my opinion. What was your gateway to Joni, and what inspired you to interpret her music today and with this specific trio?
Well, I'm just a huge fan of her work, and I love her music. Listen to it forever. You know, the various periods of her work. I remember I loved that live concert she did with, all the jazz musicians, with Pat and Don Elias and Jaco and Michael Brecker. And many of her albums, and Amelia was one of my favorite songs. I love how first of all, the song, the harmonic sequence is Joni, her own world. And also I love how she plays guitar, actually. I love her guitar playing. And so she was always a big inspiration in many ways. And then on top of it, Brian has had an intense collaboration with her. And she means a lot to him as well. So it made sense to play this song. And I'm really happy about the version we came up with in the studio. It's I have the feeling that we stay really within the song and within the atmosphere of the song while we are kind of freely talking about it. That I'm super into how we play together on that song. That type of interaction that happens on this song is something I treasure with these musicians.
And you just mentioned her guitar playing, how much you would like it. It's interesting with her is always that she always has these alternate tuning systems, right? Because for one reason, because of I think how she was limited in how she could move her left hand, but also just generally it creates a different vibe. Do you play around with different tunings?
I never do. Once in a while I tune down my low bass string to either E flat or D, but other than that I never change my tuning.
Okay.
But the thing that makes these harmonies in Joni's songs, the combination of harmony and melody and lyrics, so unique is her imagination. And then, of course, whichever tool she needs to get there, may it be a detuning a string or a different tuning or even a different comping instrument. That's her tool, but basically it's all in her imagination and in her fantasy. And I mean, the whole world loves her songs. I don't know any jazz musician who is not into her music. And she's a huge inspiration.
Wolfgang Muthspiel on his new trio recording, Dance of the Elders. Thank you for joining me in the ECM Podcast. I'm Friedrich Kunzmann, and I look forward to present more new music from ECM very soon.